All right, and we are ready to go. Welcome everyone. I'm Chelsea from the North Bergen Public Library, and welcome to North Bergen, a Postcard History. It's my pleasure to welcome Michael Mehring, our town historian and all-around history guru, who will be presenting today. I'd also like to thank the Hudson County Office of Culture and Heritage Affairs for providing grant funds towards this project. Before we begin, just a few basic ground rules. Please keep your microphone muted. During the presentation, there is a chat box option at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to type any questions in the chat box, and Michael will get to them after the presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Michael Mehring.
Thank you, Chelsea, for that introduction, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your Saturday to join us as we examine some of these great images that show what North Bergen looked like 100 years ago. And what we're going to see is we're going to take a look at landmarks that are long gone and some landmarks that are very familiar to some of us. So without much more, let me get our presentation up here and we will get started. So what we did when we started to look up these photos or these postcards is we figured everybody has seen some of these before, but really we wanted to look at the history behind these places. And where they were is important, but also who was there and why they were important at the time to be put on a postcard is something that was interesting to us. So our first image, right, is going to be titled Hudson Boulevard dividing West Hoboken and North Bergen. So that's a pretty grand mansion that we're seeing here. This is going to be the old Asmus estate. It's built by a florist by the name of Ernest Asmus during the 1870s. And his family was a pretty big deal in the county in general. They ran a huge floral operation, more or less from 14th Street, present day 14th Street, to 21st Street, in between Kennedy Boulevard and Patterson Plank Road. So that was all of their property. Behind his home yard, which unfortunately they don't show on the postcard, would have been a series of greenhouses that would have been in operation. Again, this home today is long gone. It was torn down in the 40s and was replaced by some apartment buildings. If we had to place it more or less today, it would be roughly between 17th and 18th Street on Kennedy Boulevard. And again, I always like to point out the one thing is like on these Kennedy Boulevard postcards, you'll notice that there's no traffic, right? And there's plenty of parking, which is something none of us are used to seeing today. Again, we're looking at Kennedy Boulevard here. It's titled Hudson County Boulevard. Remember, Kennedy Boulevard's not named for President Kennedy until after his assassination. Prior to that, it's known as Hudson County Boulevard. And even prior to that, it's known by several other names. The downtown section of Kennedy Boulevard would have been known as Weavertown Road because it was predominantly a lot of weaving industry in the southern part of town. But it's called Hudson County Boulevard, West Hoboken, New Jersey, and North Bergen, New Jersey. Now, they give West Hoboken a lot more credit in this picture because, believe it or not, West Hoboken, which is present-day downtown Union City, would have been a better-known location than North Bergen was around 1905 when this postcard is produced. But they do show us some homes in North Bergen, and predominantly that brown building right here in the front. That building actually is still standing on Kennedy Boulevard, and if you happen to be driving towards Jersey City on Kennedy and you pass around 21st Street, right, you can see this building. It's 2001 Kennedy Boulevard. So I think it's pretty amazing that, you know, from a historical standpoint, we have homes that are well past a century old in North Bergen, and they still retain a lot of that charm. That building that's there, if you get a chance, really there's not much of a difference outside of the coloring. So it is pretty cool to see. Here we have the Hudson County Boulevard and Plank Road with the Dietz Hotel, and says Union Hill, West Hoboken, and North Bergen. Again, they named Union Hill and West Hoboken because they're well-known locations, and North Bergen is kind of still viewed as this sleepy little farm town that, you know, not a lot of people go to. But it's very interesting, this document, because again, here we have Kennedy Boulevard and 22nd Street. And if you're from that neighborhood in North Bergen, you'll know there is a small street back there, a dead-end street called Dietz Place.
and it is named for the hotel and the hotel owner. Now, the Dietz family was a pretty big deal in North Bergen. The hotel is operated by Conrad Dietz, who was the brother of the mayor during the time, named Charles Dietz. And again, very interesting thing about this hotel is this is the only hotel that is going to be south of 32nd Street along Kennedy Boulevard. So the Dietz family kind of cornered the market on the hotel industry in the southern part of town. It was a really nice place, but it did have a little bit of a rough element. Again, we're looking at an area in the turn of the century. These are roadhouses, and they're not really the local establishment that we would know today, like our neighborhood local places. Now, these next couple of ones is a big one for everybody because we all know this place. Everybody knows Columbia Park, the shopping center. We know the kind of loose history of the area, that Columbia Park was an amusement park, but I don't think present residents understand how big of a deal this place actually was. So the Columbia Park was one of two amusement parks. That one's called North Bergen Home. So we're gonna get into the other one towards the end. But again, Columbia Park is going to be in operation from about 1919 all the way till the late 30s. The park is a major draw for the town. But again, we'll see that it says that it's Union Hill, not North Bergen. Now, there's two thoughts to that, right? Prior, I was saying towns with more recognition got the kind of title, okay? But there's this other theory that the postcards are titled Union Hill and West Hoboken because that's where the artist did the rendition from. So that's the other theory behind why North Bergen is not listed on these cards in some cases. Regardless, okay, the park is a major draw. It is met with every type of clientele. The wealthiest New Yorkers are coming here, and then, you know, the poorest locals are coming, out-of-towners are coming. There are people from all walks of life coming to this park, and we're going to see why in a few seconds, right? Interestingly enough, right, this place is going to be massive. And, you know, the owner, Otto Ascherbach, right, he's a real good salesman, and he pitches this place, you know, as the largest park in the world and the biggest pool on the East Coast and the finest amenities. And because of his salesmanship, he really keeps this park going. And again, he keeps it going through the Depression, right? And it's still a full functioning park, and it all has cutting edge technology for the time. They also knew that this cutting edge technology was going to have to be met with personal technology. So you could actually drive in and park there. They had a separate entrance for you to come drive in. You can notice on this card here, it's got a beautiful tree-lined way. And that was kind of the idea of the park itself, was as it was an escape kind of from the industrial urban areas of New York and Jersey City and Newark, right? This was the escape, right? And a lot of old-time residents that we've spoken with through the Historical Society always said, people refer to North Bergen as the country, right? And, you know, for us, that seems so bizarre to say, oh, it's the country, when we see perfectly gridded out streets and, you know, high-rise buildings and, you know, major roadways. But in the early 20th century, we're still considered the country. Up until 1920, just to put this in perspective for you guys, most of the area known as Woodcliff there's no houses up there yet, right? Most of the area that we know as, you know, Bergenwood, there's no homes there yet, right? North Bergen is predominantly still centered around Six Corners, and the area where Lincoln School kind of is, and Bergen Line Avenue. We're not really spread out throughout the whole town. So, you know, the whole park fit with the theme of kind of coming to North Bergen. Now, the park, again, like I said, it's huge. And you could tell the size of the park because the shopping center is very large too. And we actually will lose some of the ground to the creation of 495. So here we can see in this image from left to right, we have a bandstand, the free act stage, okay? The roller coaster in the background is called the Big Dipper, and we're gonna get into the Big Dipper in a minute. And then there's the arrow swings that are gonna be in the background. So the park has everything. Now, the Big Dipper was a popular style of roller coaster used across the United States during the 20s. On average, that roller coaster would have taken about 6 weeks to complete. It was completely wooden roller coaster, right? And it would have cost in that time era about $50,000 to build that roller coaster. Now, Arthur Loof is the creator of the Giant Dipper, and he does that in Santa Cruz, California. Okay, and he says this is his quote, and I really like this. He wanted this ride to give people the thrill of a plunge down a mine shaft, a balloon ascent, a parachute jump, airplane acrobatics, a cyclone, and a toboggan ride, and a ship in a storm, all in one ride. Now, I mean, that is one heck of an idea to put together. Our Big Dipper that would have stood in North Bergen was created and opened in 1923, and it was a huge deal. They took out advertisements in the Jersey Journal to make sure people knew that they were coming, and according to some of the histories we've seen on the park, that was the biggest day the park ever had, was when that roller coaster opened. Now we have a better image of it here. Again, the park is going to cover about 50 acres, right? It's a lot of space. Here we can see the Big Dipper. All right, we can see another roller coaster in the forefront called the Greyhound.
And then in the other, off to the lower right-hand side, we can see the Dodgem, right? Now, from the advertisements, we could see that the two roller coasters there in the park, one having the larger drops, while the other one, the Greyhound, is known for speed. So doesn't really have the thrill of that big drop we all go to for roller coasters, but the speed was what got people on that one. Also, the Dodgem is a very early version of the bumper car ride. Okay, and again, it's funny because now today, if you go see kids do bumper cars, the idea is to, smash into each other. But back in the day, the idea of the Dodgem was to try to avoid somebody hitting you. So it's funny how things change over time. Now, the park also had amenities in case you weren't a thrill seeker. Here we could see, we have, and it's weird because they labeled it backwards. Off to the left-hand side, you'll notice there's a little green area. There's a sign that says Columbia Gardens. So they had a botanical garden there. They had a dance pavilion. They had restaurants and bowling alleys all there. So again, this wasn't just your theme park to bring the kids to. This would have been a place you went to as an adult, or a young adult, or an older adult, whatever, for a date night, right? This was a day out, right? This was a night out. This place had everything. So again, Columbia Park was dubbed
the Fairyland of New Jersey by its owner. He claimed that the dance pavilion was the largest in the state. Aside from the entertainment amenities, again, they also had a pony track. They had skee ball, right? The new classic New Jersey boardwalk game, skee ball. They had shooting galleries. They had a Japanese tea room, and they also had a penny arcade area. Now, again, these are all big deals because nobody's doing this yet, right? Coney Island is kind of doing it, but there's no really massive expansion, not to insult anything, but for in the middle of nowhere. Right? There's no idea of Six Flags or anything like that yet. Here we have the bird's eye view of Columbia Park. Now, this image didn't really hold up too well, but it just gives us kind of the size and the depth of the park. And yes, that is Sea Caucus all the way in the background. There is the boardwalk in the park as well. And it says near the Frolic. The Frolic was just another ride. In here, we can see some of the attractions. We have the Frolic, we have Noah's Ark, we have an old mill. All right, and these, again, were kind of walk-through exhibits that you could go to. And we'll see more of them in a minute here. The castle, or Ye Castle, if we want to be fancy, right? I really like this. This is a really interesting piece of history because it's going to tie into a couple other buildings in North Bergen. Something is going on in North Bergen, especially early North Bergen, early Hudson County, with the people who are coming here, the people who are finding their ways to the United States. We get a lot of English settlers, we get a lot of German settlers, and they try to rebuild the castles of their homelands here. So the castle that was once put in in Columbia Park was there before the park. That building is going to be built roughly around 1840 by a man named William Contello. Now, if you're familiar with some of the streets in Union City, you'll know there's a Contello Place near 495, and that's where that name comes from. It comes from the gentleman who built this castle. And it's rumored, and again, this is a really interesting thing about history. When you look at some of the stories we have that have been passed down for this long, right? The rumor about Cantello is that he came to America because his family did not approve of the woman he was going to marry. So in the middle of the night, he took a bunch of money from his family, grabbed his, girl, and basically came to the United States. And they built a castle in North Bergen. Later on, he moved on from North Bergen, and it was just incorporated into the park as a restaurant, almost think early medieval times themed restaurant right here in North Bergen. The rooms would have been lined with, shields and swords and all that kind of kitschy, King Arthur stuff. But it was at one point a dude's house. We also have the Noah's Ark ride, right? And again, we have these walking things. Now, outside we can see that there's some type of massive papier-mâché elephant. But if you would have walked inside to this exhibit, you would have seen live animals, right? They would have, obviously, Noah's Ark, 2 of every kind, right? They would have had mostly local animals, but we did see advertisements for both the zoo that would have been located there and Noah's Ark as having monkeys, as having rhinoceroses. Now, we don't have any pictures to know how true that is, but they did advertise having a rhinoceros at least in 1927. So who knows how they might have pulled that one off. But you would have been able to see basically anything or things you would have never seen in North Bergen right there. Now, as summertime gets closer, we all look to go swimming. The pool in Columbia Park was no joke. Again, we see it's listed as Union City, so that also gives us a time frame for this postcard. We know this postcard came after 1926, which is very interesting because we can see the Little Dipper, or excuse me, the Big Dipper is still standing in the background there. But the pool here is a big deal, okay? The pool would generally be open from late May until late September. They got a pretty big season for swimming there. The pavilion in the background was separated by gender, right? And had nearly 6,000 lockers on site. So they knew that people would come to the park just for the pool. Remember, there's no public pools in the early 1920s. You had to have some serious money if you had a pool in your home. So the idea of having a pool here, the owners of the park really cashed in on the idea of getting people to come in. Now, we have the Silver Falls at Columbia Park here in North Bergen. And again, what's a pool without a waterfall, right? If you're going to have a pool this big, you better have some stuff to keep people occupied. The pool could hold about 6,000 people. It was completed in 1921, and the pool itself held 1.5 million gallons of water and had 250 feet and was 250 feet long by 160 feet, 65 feet wide, with a maximum depth of 12 feet at its deepest. And it was kind of like those modern day wave pools where you could kind of walk in. It was sloped downwards, and it was supplied with fresh water, and it was continuously circulated by a massive filtration system, which again, for the time, was groundbreaking stuff. Nobody's ever done this before on this scale. Now, somebody, when we did this presentation once before, was where did they get the water from? That's a good question. Where we found that they were getting the water from was from a couple of sources. They were either pumping the water up from the Hudson River and the Hackensack River, and Chrome-Kill Creek, which is kind of off of in between Tunnelly Avenue and West Side Avenue today. But there was also a freshwater stream that ran under the park. So they were able to get water from multiple sources close to keep that water flowing in and keeping it fresh. So here we have Kennedy Boulevard. Okay, now again, we're kind of moving northward right now, geographically speaking. In the background there, behind those trees, that's going to be the original part of Shutson Park. It came into existence in 1872 when the United Schutzen Association opened the park on the site of the old mansion. And again, that was that Ye Castle place that we just saw. In between that time, though, when Cantello moves out, we also have a man that moves in there, William Wright. William Wright is, he's in the cotton business, and, when the Civil War comes along, he loses everything. And then the German Association comes in and buys out the property right out from him. Again, The park here in Shutson Park is going to be very similar to Columbia Park, but what we got to understand is they're not the same. They're two separate entities. Shutson Park is always going to be more kind of that German community social club, where Columbia Park is going to be more open to the general public. Again, he has everything going on here. Here we can see that Fritz Reuter building that we all know so well, right? It has not changed at all since they constructed that. Sure, we have additions and things like that, but I like this one because it shows that 32nd Street area, and what a change that's there. Now we have the Sears and Roebuck building that is still standing there. There's a McDonald's in the place of the hotel on the lower right-hand corner, and Shutson Park, they took over that whole kind of area there. But it does give us a little kind of clue of what the area looked like way back in the day, which I think is pretty interesting. Here we have the Shutson Park, again, the lake and festival hall. Again, they had a lake there at one point, which I think is very interesting. It was a man-made lake, was not natural, and we don't know who made it. We've seen it on several land surveys dating back at least to 1850, but when we look at like an 1820 survey, it's gone. We have no idea who would have put it there. So we don't know if it just wound up being something to help with flooding or whatnot, or if it just was an addition added, to beautify the property. In 1911, though, Shutson Park is going to claim to be the largest park of its kind in the world, and pretty much from their inception up until their closing in the last 10, 15 years when they changed hands in ownership, it was one of the largest German congregations in the country, right? And they had all their festivals there of all these different groups and societies, of that, the German heritage groups. And the place was equipped with everything that they felt they needed. Originally was built with rifle ranges that were 600 feet long by 200 feet across. It had 10 bowling alleys. It had 3 dancing pavilions and could accommodate nearly 50,000 people at any given time. So the park was also contained a variety of attractions. They also had vaudeville performances. Every time there was an event there, they held a parade. They had weekly fireworks. They had sporting tournaments, especially with shooting. So this was another place where, the immigrant German community that once lived in North Bergen would actually go to, Hudson County, would constantly go to. Again, here's an old entrance to Shutson Park. Right, we could see what's going on here. The postcard here says that there's an upcoming football game coming, and it's between 2 of the local clubs, Academy Athletic Club and Jefferson Athletic Club. Now, we've tried to research who these groups were. Jefferson Athletic Club, there's about 8 of them that come up, and we're really not sure what it's in reference to. We know that there's a Jefferson Street in West New York. We knew there was a Jefferson School in North Bergen. Each of them had a Jefferson Athletic Club, so we're not sure who gets to or who was on this team. And also something that I've been trying to find out since we've been doing this is a score of this game, which we still do not know. But as soon as I know, you will know. Here's another image of the lake inside of Shutson Park. Again, the lake is going to be eventually filled in after the Columbia Park era is gone, and the Shutson Park itself will expand a little bit, and then we have the modern changes of today. Here we have inside Shutson Park, just another view to show you what it would have looked like heading in, and the experience people would have gotten. Here's the interior of the main dance pavilion at Shutson Park. Right, and again, this would have doubled for a couple of things. It was obviously a dance hall, but they had sporting events in here. We found advertisements for boxing events, basketball games, wrestling matches. There's even advertisements for roller skating nights and things along those lines. So this was, again, a really big place in the community, and people would have gone to it for a wide array of reasons. Now, we have the entrance to Becker's Castle, and it says Union Hill again, and we could kind of understand why it says Union Hill because it's showing us from the Union City side of Kennedy Boulevard. Most of you will recognize this building, right? Becker's Castle is another castle in North Bergen, right? Like I said, there's a few castles that pop up in this town, but this one's still around, just in a different manner. So the estate here is going to belong to Louis Becker. He's a real estate speculator who owns basically most of modern day North Bergen, south of 46th Street, all of Union City, parts of Weehawken. He's like a big deal, this Louis Becker gentleman. He's going to set up his house on modern day Kennedy Boulevard, right? Again, the wall in both of these postcards are still there. They're just kind of covered in stucco today. And you can notice in the right-hand side of this picture, a spiral starting to come out. Becker's castle was rumored to be imported brick by brick from Germany, where he is from. And it's supposed to be modeled after a castle that he knew in his childhood. But, you know, if you look at that building and you look at these images, it does just look like good old-fashioned Palisade bluestone. But let me just show you where we're talking about here so you understand. Okay, here's Becker's castle. Maybe some of you are starting to recognize it now. This is the current New York, New Jersey, or the Garden State Crematory. So the crematory at its early stages was a home. Okay, so that sounds super creepy, but just stick with me. We'll explain how it goes from a home to a crematory. Okay, so again, here's what happens. We have Becker, he comes in and he builds this massive home, right? Sits it on Kennedy Boulevard. It's the only thing for miles, right? Remember, in the 1860s, 70s, 80s, Kennedy Boulevard doesn't have a lot going on. North Bergen Town Hall itself is not built until about 1907. So this is a major, major landmark. He's kind of hanging out here all by himself. Becker himself gets into the cemetery business. He gets involved with Palisade Cemetery and Weehawken Cemetery, and he actually starts getting into the idea of cremation and creating a crematory. Here we have another image of it, and again, this is not from Kennedy Boulevard. These images are all actually from behind the crematory. And you can notice that it says the New York, New Jersey Crematory there. When Becker passes away, his family sells off the building to the crematory company. Now, again, he does so, and you know that's kind of the way the history goes. And something that gets lost along the ways is a great story about Becker himself, and it's something I enjoy retelling because it's a very Hudson County story, right? This is a very Hudson County way to make money, I would say. Becker is going to hold an auction on his properties, right? He's going to go to New York. He's going to hold a random blind auction, sight unseen of these properties. He's got a map, and it's just gridded out. That's all it is. And he raffles off the properties or the tracts of land, right? That's basically going to be located between Kennedy and Park Avenue and locked by 47th to 39th Street. He sells, the sell-off when is planned, right? The buyers give him the down payment, and then they make their way from New York City. They get off a ferry in Weehawken, make their way up the hill, and to their surprise, this land is just completely undeveloped. The only thing there is Becker's home, and Becker's looking for people to develop the property around him, right? It's a smart move. Some of these buyers or investors, they're in marshes, they're in dense wood, they're standing on top of rock piles. They have no idea what's going on. What happens though is Becker says, no returns. Read the fine print of the contract. And he charges them $2.50 a month plus interest until the property is paid off. So again, Becker is a hustler, right? He knows how to make a buck. And after he sells off all his property, he retires. And we find that he is going to list himself as a florist on the census record. So I think that's a pretty interesting one. Here we have another image, right? The early image of the crematory, right around the change in ownership. In 1907 is when the building gets remodeled and divided into new rooms, right? With the walls for the urns and all that. There's an addition of a 2-story wing to the south side, and today the crematory is still in operation. It caters to all the religious denominations. Becker and his family are still there too, in some sense. They're buried behind the building in Weehawken Cemetery. So it's pretty interesting. Here we have, again, probably the most iconic landmark in North Bergen. Everybody knows this building, right? Town Hall is unique among the buildings in North Bergen because of its construction style. It's going to be a palazzo style construction. It's built between 1905 and 1908. The first mayor actually gets to work in the building in 1907 while construction is going on around him. We're going to have there, and that first mayor, excuse me, is going to be James Nolan. He's going to take that corner office in the lower right-hand part of the building. And what a lot of people don't know is a way to help pay off the construction cost of this building is the top floor of Town Hall was once broken up into apartments. And it was rented. There were 2 apartments up there, and they rented the town actually rented these apartments out to people until 1970. So that's a pretty interesting thing. Then we have this great recolorized image of Town Hall, and we're looking north now. Depicts, it's unimaginable. Again, it's trafficless, and there's parking spots all over the place on Kennedy Boulevard, right? Nobody would have ever known or thought that would be possible, that you couldn't find parking on this road back in 1910 when this is built. We see that's Boulevard and Fulton Street, right? And just to give you a sense here, Kennedy Boulevard, Hudson Boulevard is not fully operational until 1895, right? That's when we finally connect the entire thing from 91st Street all the way down to Bayonne as one continuous road. So again, we put Town Hall on this road because it's the main thoroughfare through the county. Prior to that, Town Hall would have been located near 51st Street and Tunnelly Avenue. Also, you can notice in this photo and the photo prior, the iconic cannons that are outside of North Bergen Town Hall are not there, right? We really don't know where they came from. We know that the town hall was renovated in 1926, and we think they might have been added then, because here's a photo that we know comes from at least after World War I, and we know that the monument that's there right next to the American flag, that was put up in 1920 to the men who served over in World War I. So we know the building was kind of changed around then, and we are looking at the model of car, and we know that this image might be coming from the later 20s. So, you know, we think that the cannons might have been put up during the remodel. Again, very interesting to look at. Here's another image, right? Some older residents may remember it. And I don't mean to be insulting when I said older residents. Okay, but here is the Grove Reformed Church, right? Everybody knows that one on 46th Street and Kennedy Boulevard. This is the original version of that building. The interesting thing I like about Grove Church is they happen to be almost as old as the town of North Bergen. North Bergen was formed in 1843, and Grove Church actually starts operation in 1847. So they're about the same age. The land for the church was purchased by the Zabriskie family, right? If you're familiar with Jersey City, they're a big name down there. Reverend William Mabin, right, was the first to serve the congregation until he left and became a Rutgers College professor. Here's a little better image of the building. I like this one. It gives us a little more clearer look to it. Again, this is going to be the original church. It stood for almost 126 years, right? In 1883, they celebrated Martin Luther, right, his 400th birthday. That was a big deal. That place was, you know, had a ton of people come in for that. Now, again, most residents that would have been around in, you know, the 70s may remember this, but that building was being painted bright white, and during the renovation of it, it was actually destroyed. It was it caught fire in 1973, and then they rebuilt it in 1976, and that's the church that's there today on the corner of 46th and Kennedy Boulevard. Here's one again. This is always interesting to me because as a kid, I lived in the neighborhood near Flower Hill Cemetery, and I always passed by. I always thought that building was super creepy. So this postcard, I like it a lot. But again, it's Flower Hill Cemetery. This is the Queen Anne style cottage that was set up in front. This was built for the caretaker, and you could see the old caretaker's garage behind where, you know, without all his material. This cemetery's been there for about 130 years, give or take. The name Flower Hill actually comes from the former unincorporated town. Right before the cemetery was there, they referred to that area as Flower Hill, and you had some residencies towards the Tunnelly Avenue section of the cemetery. The cemetery is made up of 12 acres, okay, and was established not only as a cemetery, but a botanical garden, okay? And this is kind of weird, but when they built the cemetery, they planted you know, a wide array of plants, both native and foreign fauna. And people would go there on like a Sunday afternoon, not to visit graves, but to, you know, have a picnic, to take in the sights of the tombstones and the plants and the animal life that they would have saw there. And again, now today we look at cemeteries and go, okay, I gotta go see, you know, clean so-and-so's grave or whatnot. But there's, you know, cemeteries used to be the escape. That was the only real park for people to go to. Today, the cemetery is home to a grave, mass grave for a Hoboken pier fire that happened in 1900. You can go down there. It's a very large grave. There's also the Civil War veteran, Decatur Dorsey. He's buried in there. And it's home to New Jersey's only pyramid grave, right? The grave of Charles F. Harm. It's got a pyramid. It's got sphinxes in front of it. Really interesting thing. Gets a lot of hype on the internet. We're going to move a little more uptown, right? Here's the old people's home on the Boulevard in North Bergen High School. North Bergen. I said North Bergen High School. I got a little bit ahead of myself because this is more or less where North Bergen High School is today. This building was torn down in the 40s, right? Maybe the 50s. And it was made to make way for where the North Bergen Board of Education is now today. Now, again, some residents may recognize the name Haas's Point, right? The Haas family was a big family in North Bergen. They arrive in 1860. They arrive in 1860, okay? We don't really know much more about how Haas Point got the name. We just assume that's because the family owned it. We're going to call it that, okay? They were German immigrants, all right? They came again, and we found them on the 1870 census. And it said that their property, this area in North Bergen, Haas's Point, is worth about $20,000 in 1870. And we did some calculations, and we realized that's about $400,000 today. So it's interesting to see, market value in North Bergen. We're doing pretty well. It's lining up on point. You then go a little further north, and we get the Waldorf Hotel. No relation to the actual Waldorf, except that they opened in the same year. And the owner of this hotel decided to steal the name because he thought he could get more customers that way. Again, great idea, right? In the world of business, I guess. But again, the Waldorf had everything a guest could want, whether they stayed there for the day or overnight. All right, the inn had a saloon with the finest spirits of the day, as well as a variety of lagers from local breweries. And again, eventually in the history of the Waldorf, the owners strike a deal with the William Peter Brewery, and there is going to actually be an addition of a beer garden there, and they're only going to sell that one type of beer. Underneath the building, there were bowling alleys built. They had tons of local tournaments up there. And the Waldorf also had, every Friday, we found advertisements for the Waldorf having clam bakes. Now, again, the Waldorf is part of this greater area that, I get a lot of, flack sometimes from people because I say this is all part of Nun Guessers because, it's the bigger name. But this would be located roughly like on 91st Street and Kennedy Boulevard. If you follow the track around Kennedy Boulevard, right, you'd wind up by Hudson County Park, by White Castle, by Nun Guessers. So these hotels are all built around the Nun Guesser area. Again, to kind of corner that market on the little Coney Island and stuff we'll get into down the road. Now, here's one. I really like this one because all these buildings are actually all still standing. And you can go down there and check it out today. North Bergen is really more than just one town, right? North Bergen's a big town, and we're really a collection of neighborhoods more than a town. And the postcards really tell us that. So far, we've seen things say New Durham, and we'll see that again. Here we have Weatherby Park. We're going to see Woodcliff, right? And Weatherby Park is one of these kind of forgotten neighborhoods that we don't really talk about anymore. It's the area between 76th Street and 74th Street, locked by Kennedy and Bergen line. So we know that it's called Weatherby Park because the Weatherby family at one point owned it, and when they sold it, the streets were divided off. This image itself, if you go to 74th Street and 2nd Avenue and stand on the corner, all of those homes are all on the left-hand side. Really, the only biggest difference is the street is not as tree-lined anymore. But again, it's really interesting to see that a postcard from about 1905, 1907, we know, and all the original structures are still on the street. Now we'll get into, like I said, another neighborhood in North Bergen, Woodcliff, right? This is going to be known as Woodcliff on Hudson, right? This gets a couple of names. This is the area, and as a guy from 67th Street, I don't like admitting this, but this is the nicest. Like, I always thought the nicest homes in North Bergen were always up there. This is because when it's created, this is where the wealth of North Bergen is going to be concentrated. This is where all your bankers are going to live. This is where all your real estate developers are going to live. This is where all your business owners are living, hotel proprietors. This is real big time, movers and shakers that are living in the Woodcliff area. What is most interesting is this picture off to the left, right? That is where it says land office. That's actually the old Woodcliff train station. That building is still in North Bergen. It's not at that location, which is 31st Street, which today would be 75th Street, right? The trick to putting the numbers together is just add 44 to the number. But regardless, the home that's here, or excuse me, the train station would actually be moved at one point to 72nd Street, I believe. And the home is still there, right? It's still there, kind of just hanging out. The old train station's there. So if you're ever in that area, you could go take a look. It's pretty cool. Here we have another, again, iconic building in North Bergen. Most people know where this is. It's always been a restaurant for its past. And again, located on 31st Street, which again, today is 75th Street. So you could go down to 75th and Broadway and you could see this building. It's a Victorian style building. And the only thing that's really missing is those spirals on top. That's really the only thing that's missing of that building. Again, here's a better image of the train station and the Woodcliff land office. For a long time, people would argue where this was because the train car says Palisade on it, right? And people didn't understand why the Palisade Avenue train was on Broadway. But in reality, it's not named for the street. It's named for the actual Palisades. The Palisade train, you would have had really beautiful views of the Hudson River and New York because it rode on top of the Palisades. But that train is going to be operated by the North Hudson Rail Company, and that gets established in the 1860s. But the trolley line doesn't reach North Bergen until the 1870s. Again, the Woodcliff station is the transfer station between Hudson and Bergen County. So this was a big popular area. 75th Street was a buzzing area, always had a lot of stuff going on in there. And like I said, the building was moved again, to 74th Street, right off of Boulevard East. That building was moved to. So again, it's kind of tucked on a really small street, but you can check it out. Here's the other side of that view. This is 75th Street looking towards Bergen Line Avenue. Now the apartment building on the left is still there. The apartment building on the right has been replaced by the bank. But that building on the right was a huge part of the area, and it was built by a guy by the name of George Haplin. He built the first building for himself on the corner, but Haplin, did pretty well for himself, and he extends this property, right, and builds an entire section that actually gets called the Haplin Block, right, all the way, almost reaches 76th Street. Now, again, here we have it, right? Most of the time, when we look at these postcards, right, they're produced for the Woodcliff section of town. Again, they were in a really bad dispute with North Bergen at the time. They actually wanted to break away from the township. It had a little bit to do with the residents felt disconnected from town because town hall was located, down on 43rd Street, but there was also this underlying reason. They had a big problem with the amusement park, Little Coney Island, that was in Hudson County Park. So they actually took their complaint to the state of New Jersey in 1909. And there was actually a bill that was titled the Woodcliff Bill. And it was, it was very interesting. It's got a great history. You could read more about it at the North Bergen Historical Society's website. But in reality, it was run by a guy who was a real estate developer, and then it was given to a senator, and the senator didn't read it, and everybody from North Bergen went to Trenton and jam-packed the committee hall, and they had to close the doors, and then that senator had to admit he didn't read the bill, and then everybody went home, and North Bergen lived happily ever after. But if the one thing would have gone different, we may have had two separate towns here. But regardless, this is the Happenbach in its entirety. Now, it's completed around 1912, and notice even after the case of Woodcliffe's attempt at succession, the people are still referring to it as Woodcliff on Hudson or Woodcliff, okay? That was, again, a real estate ploy to get people to try and buy into the area. But the Happenbach was sold, and in the late 20s, the Woodcliff Trust Company bought it, and they start demolishing it to replace it with their own construction, which is the bank that is currently located there. So I believe it's a Wells Fargo today. I might be wrong. It might have changed. But that's the original bank building. We know that it's built somewhere between 25 and 35. So it's pretty interesting that a bank is being built in the midst of the Depression, which is pretty, interesting. But you can still see original parts of the Happenbach that are still standing there. It's still right next to the bank. So if you're in that area on Broadway, now you can tell somebody about the Haplin block. Here we have 30th Street or 74th Street looking west from Broadway. Okay, so we're looking up towards Bergen Line Avenue. And again, these homes are model homes. These are model homes, right? Built for prospective North Bergen residents. Three of the biggest builders not only designed most of the homes in the Woodcliff section today, but they also lived there. Okay, you had Oscar Broberg, who was up there, Andrew Hawkinson, and then Oscar Horgless, right? These are the three big guys. They're building every home up there. So it's pretty interesting to know that they worked where they lived, right? And that's pretty nice, I guess, comforting thing to know. If you bought a house, the guy who built it lived 2 blocks away, and if you had a problem, you could come over and take a look at it. The next two postcards show the two sides of the same intersection on 76th and Broadway. This one here, we're looking east, okay? Today, 2 of those homes can still be found. Those 2 homes that are there, unfortunately, we're gonna see it on the other side. In the above, the home that can be found on the southwest corner of the intersection. All right, while in this one, we are going to see the home off to the left, the one with the arrow pointed over it. That's still there as well. But again, you can see as you look down the streets, and if you could go take a look today. Most of these homes are still standing on these streets. Again, here's 33rd Street. Again, we're looking at 77th Street. I like this one. Again, you can notice that it's got that Spanish style tile roof on it towards the left-hand side. You don't really see that too often in North Bergen. This one, again, here's a major iconic building. That building off to the right, that old Victorian house that's there. For years, we have thought that building was the oldest building in town, right? In reality, that house is built in 1893. It's on the corner of 78th and Broadway. But there's actually a home literally 2 doors up from this house that predates that house by 4 years, built by Frederick Otterstedt. So if you're ever on that street, if you're ever on 78th Street, that is one of the original blocks of the Woodcliff section of North Bergen. And what they're going to do is they're going to refer to all these things as castles, right? Now, it's really cool, or manors, when they build them. So it's pretty interesting. We'll get into some of the schools. I mean, I know I'm a teacher during the year. So, if you're a parent, you probably miss these buildings dearly for your children. But here we have school number 2, okay? All of the schools in North Bergen, I mean, now we obviously have names. We have Robert Fulton and Horace Mann and Lincoln School and all those schools. But back in the day, they just referred to them public school number 2, right? Public school number 2 is going to become Robert Fulton School. Now, this is clearly not the Robert Fulton School we know today, okay? But PS2 is built, and then by the time the 20s come around, it's time to replace this building. They're viewing this building as outdated by the 20s. So they want to, put the new Robert Fulton School there. The school comes up and, It cost the town $671,000 to build Robert Fulton School in the 20s. Now, today we did the math. It comes out to almost $10 million. Okay. And, you know, I think it's interesting, but every time we build a school in North Bergen, one way or another, the cost always kind of spilled over, right? And every time you look at the construction of schools in the 20s in North Bergen, and we could factor in the Depression and all that, you know, lower population and all that stuff, but every school practically bankrupted the town being built, right? So I think it's really interesting to see that they did put a lot of work into the schools to make sure that they would last. Now, again, right opposite that, right, today we know what's there. There's the old Temple Bethel that's there now, and I'm drawing a blank at who occupies it right now, but the building still stands. This is the original building on the corner of 75th and Hudson Avenue. This is the Reformed Church. It was created in 1911. However, the structure was previously occupied by a Baptist congregation, right? And it was taken down in 1959 for that, you know, that newer construction that's there. Here we have a really cool view, right? I like this. We know this is from the 20s and 30s, mainly because the apartment buildings in the background, that's near Hudson County Park. It's a pretty cool one. Really interesting story about this is that the building behind the church, you can see that big skylight in there. That was the rectory, right, where the priest would have lived or the pastor would have lived. It also had a basketball court inside of there. So that was kind of their recreation center for the church. And there's also another great story about the early congregation. They didn't have a piano in the church. So they actually would wheel a piano every Sunday down 75th Street, bring it into the church, and then after services, they would bring it back to the owner's home to make sure they had music for, you know, their services. Here we have the old Woodcliff Engine Company. Again, this is still there. It's part of the North Hudson Regional firefighters now. This was originally a volunteer firehouse just to serve the growing population of the Woodcliff area. So if you're up that area, you can still go by and take a look. Here we're going to have kind of blurry. It says it's the old mansion, right? Over 100 years old. It's actually the old Hamilton Meeks mansion. Hamilton Meeks and the Meeks family, they're big names and movers and shakers in North Bergen at this time. Hamilton Meeks is going to be the president of the Woodcliff Land Company, and he's going to be a real big guy on developing the area. Just as, again, this is the guy responsible for trying to break North Bergen apart in some sense. When his home burns down, the town of North Bergen actually, well, not the town, but people turn it into a postcard, the ruins of the old mansion. The building catches fire by accident. The Meeks family had moved years before. There was another family living there. Nobody got hurt. They actually think it was more of an insurance thing at the time from some of the old reports we've seen. They think it was an insurance job, but because the building burned down, some residents had an axe to grind with Meeks and they turned it into a postcard. Now we have, again, New Jersey, you know, North Bergen gets a, you know, we always get overlooked. Everybody always says Weehawken's got the great view, right? No, North Bergen's got the best view of the city, I would say. Here we can see that's 74th Street all the way out there where that curve is. That's actually at one point known as Blockhouse Point. Blockhouse Point is going to be where the Battle of the Blockhouse took place. And again, you could kind of go out there and see this. We're actually looking into this whole Blockhouse Point now and to see, you know, the development of the area. Again, here's the other view of Blockhouse Point and looking down towards the river. We can see it's nothing like we know today. We then have the Palisade, right? We can see it says here Palisades 300 feet high. And this is always kind of an engineering marvel that I always like to point out. We're kind of losing sight of that now with the development down there. But Boulevard East is not really a flat roadway. It's a series of interconnecting bridges that start all the way in North Bergen and go all the way down to Weehawken. So you're never really on flat ground. I mean, you're on solid ground, you're on a bridge, which is pretty interesting. This area also has a really dark nickname. This was known as Suicide Bridge. The reason is during the Depression era, like I said, you had a lot of wealthy people in the northern end of town. And during the Depression, you know, They took the expressway down to River Road as as I guess a lighter way to say that. But there's a record of people jumping from that bridge throughout history, through the town's history. Here's another view, right? That is going to be Hudson County Park off to the right-hand side. Here we have Woodcliff, and again, I like this one. It's very interesting. You could see off in the background big wood cutouts. It says Woodcliff, right? We are advertising Woodcliff as if we were Hollywood for the prospective buyers in that overcrowded city across the river, right? This was your alternative. Like I said, people used to refer to North Bergen as the country. Right, again, another view most of us have probably never seen of River Road, these shipyards that would have been down there. Now, this is the view from Woodcliff. Most likely this would have been more in that shady side neighborhood of town that we know. Here we go way in another direction because we went all the way uptown, now we gotta go downtown. Well, not down, midtown. This is the old McCullum homestead in New Durham. So this is more or less where you get off Patterson Plank Road coming in from Secaucus today. Kind of close to Six Corners. This is a major stop for people heading down to Jersey City and people heading into New York, right? Again, New Durham, the New Durham area, the Six Corners area, that's a major part of North Bergen, and that's another area where there's always something going on. Now, this place is owned and operated by Cornelius McCullum. He lives here with his family, right? And he entertains everybody. He is friends with Cornelius Vanderbilt, right? And again, they think he's friends with Vanderbilt because of how close they are to the railroad, that Vanderbilt would stay at that hotel. And he also was kind of rubbing elbows with a lot of famous New Jersey politicians. This postcard too, if you actually could enhance it, I wish I would have done it for today, I forgot to, but that horse-drawn carriage, it actually says American and Pacific on there. That's a A&P cart in the old supermarket, A&P, which is pretty cool. Here we have, again, another iconic North Bergen location, right? The First Baptist Church from North Bergen. They're going to hold services there before the town's even made, right? They have their first service in 1837, and that structure that's there on the corner now dates back to 1856. Here we have another great image when they celebrated their 100th anniversary. Then we can move a little in a different direction. Here's the F.R. Austin Lumber Mill in North Bergen. Again, this is owned and operated by Frank and Martin, two brothers. Today it's long gone, except for the building in the back there, that one apartment building with the white trim, that's still there. The mill is gone, but if you go to 40th and Grand Avenue, you can still find that smaller apartment house in the background. Then you have the post office for New Durham. There's a lot going on here. The first post office established in North Bergen was in 1845 and was operated by a guy named Henry Ackerson. They then moved the building in 1863. That's the building we can see here. It shows us in the early 1900s. It's located kind of near where Rumba Cubana is today, in that neighborhood. And it's operated by Abraham Kittle. And it's actually succeeded by his wife, Caroline Kittle. She's going to be one of the first women to be a postmaster. And she's credited with creating the return receipt that's still used by the Postal Service today. Here we have 79th Street, right? Hudson County Park is going to be right there. And you can see that building, and that street has not changed much since this postcard was created, which was about 1918, 1920. The inside of the park, right? Again, those towers are still there. We're missing those tops now. We're not really sure when the tops came down or for what reason. We do know that the park had some financial issues. The county had some issues with replacing some of the masonry work in the park in the 60s. So we think it might have been all taken down in one shot to alleviate repair costs. But the park itself was created by a guy by the name of Charles Lowry. Lowry gets hired by the Hudson County Parks Commission, and he designed several parks across the county. Each park is still there today. He designs Jersey City's Lincoln Park in Pershing Field. He designs Bayonne Park in Bayonne, Columbus Park in Hoboken, and West Hudson County Park in Kearney and Harrison. So Lowry was a busy guy. And all of these parks, if you go to them, it's interesting because you can see that there is a lot of stuff that is the same in all of these parks. So Lowry did have a great vision, but there's also something unique in each one. Our unique one is going to be this structure. The rest house, you know, it was a police officer. The county police used it for a while. And again, it's a place where most people will go take pictures today. Now, again, you have this whole manicured park that Lowry designs, right? He features that the park is today still 63 acres, but Lowry says it's 63 acres of woods and planted grounds, 2.5 miles of gravel walking paths, as well as, and again, people don't write like this anymore. I wish they did. Paths that will wind in and out of the knolls and down the vales. Now, every time I go through Hudson County Park, I kind of forget that knolls and vales are there, but, you know, it's being used constantly by people today. He went on to reveal how the swamp, right, that was there would be converted into a freshwater-fed lake, right? That's the lake in the park today. They once called it Woodcliff Lake. You hear some people refer to it. And he did so to provide adequate boating, right? He said the lake would also have a complementing bandstand, which will appeal strongly to park patrons, all right, and will enable, and he boasted that this thing was going to be on the island in the lake. This way, it would enable boaters to cluster around and still not prevent persons on the shore from hearing the music clearly. So again, there's a lot of engineering that goes into these parks, and I think it kind of gets lost over time that we don't really realize what went into making something like this. Here we have the rest house again. Right? Again, just another great picture. I think TD Bank on 76th Street in Kennedy has this hanging up in there. It's pretty cool. This is a fan favorite. Everybody loves this. And I love telling kids about this during class. Here is Little Coney Island. Was one of the town's largest draws in the 20th century. And it was so because, you know, we had the Guttenberg racetrack right across the street. And you had nun guessers and you had all these amusements there. It's estimated the park would have 5,000 visitors every weekend. Okay, this park came complete with everything. You had a carousel that was there. You had and the carousel maker actually made his carousels right there, Frederick Dole. We had a Ferris wheel, and then you could see in this, we have the ride called the Tickler. Okay, it had a pool, it had restaurants, shooting galleries. Abe Dormer's ice cream was there. There was a casino, there were beer stands, there was stages for performances, there was arrow swings. Right, and there was a numerous amount of rotating kind of, you know, carnival games that would make their way through the park. Again, it looks great, but in reality, the park was kind of a really shady place and had some really questionable stuff going on there, which is going to be why it demises. But we're looking at the good here. Here's another image that shows us Abe Dormer's ice cream, right, and Frederick Dole's operation in the carousel. One interesting thing, right, and this was researched by Ronnie Skokandich. He's another local history buff here in North Bergen. He found out that Abe Dormer is going to be credited with creating the Waffle Cone, right? This is a really cool piece of history. In 1904, Abe Dormer, he's a Syrian immigrant. He's just at the World's Fair, and he's at the right place at the right time. He's standing near an ice cream vendor. Okay, and for some reason in 1904, they didn't give bowls, and, you know, obviously there's no cones invented yet. He's putting ice cream on a plate, and, you know, people are eating ice cream, right, enjoying their day. He runs out of paper plates. Now he's got no way to sell the ice cream. Abe Dormer's standing there, and he's looking at the guy selling ice cream, and he looks over to his right, and there's a guy selling waffles, right, guy selling homemade waffles. So Dormer buys a waffle, folds it in half, buys the ice cream, slaps it on top, and the Waffle Cone is born right there in St. Louis by a guy from North Bergen. Okay, he then comes back home, sets up shop, and sells waffle cones right there in Little Coney Island. Now, he comes back, and again, you can still get these if you're ever traveling down south in Norfolk, Virginia. They've evolved a little bit, the family. It's Dormer Barbecue, but they still, you know, have his original machinery, which is pretty cool. Here's a better image of the Dormers and their operation. Here's a great image kind of an area most people will recognize. It's greatly changed today, right? Here we are at the kind of border of Fairview and North Bergen. We're looking towards the park, right? Nungesser's Hotel is off here to the right. That's where present Noches, the Noches de Colombia is. And if you look off to the left, that's where the ice cream shop would be. I like this image because I get to tell another one of my favorite stories. The Nungesser Hotel actually stretches over the border into Fairview. And they do so because Nungesser wants to sell alcohol on Sundays, which North Bergen won't allow. So Nungesser extends his hotel, paints a yellow line down it. So if the police came in on the North Bergen side on a Sunday and you had a drink, you ran onto Fairview, the Fairview side on the other side of the yellow line. Again, ingenuity of business owners. Here's another image of the Nungesser Hotel. It was a really big deal. You could have stayed there overnight, but most North Bergeners and people coming over from the county line would have just kind of gone in for day trips and hung out. We also had a very large floral industry across town. Like I said, the Asmus Estate. Here we have William Bluthengen's floral establishment on Bulls Ferry Road. Not the hill, but Bulls Ferry Road is going to be turned into Woodcliff Avenue that wraps around the northern end of the park. Here's Heimdall's Pine Lawn. I just always find this very fascinating. Heimdall's Pine Lawn was more or less a place you would pay to walk around and smell pine trees. It was run by a family of German immigrants, the Heimdall family. Frederick Heimdall had this property and kind of just planted pine trees and let people pay him to walk around his property. It's pretty interesting. Then you have the Riverview Hotel, right? And another image over here, not that, inviting in the second image. And then our last image, these are all in the Hudson Heights neighborhood. Like I said, we have all these neighborhoods in North Bergen. We have Hudson Heights Hotel, which is going to be here. This building is still here on Palisade Plaza. It's been changed a little bit. It was a post office. It was a drugstore. I think at one point it was even a bar. So this building had a long history. But again, if you're up in that area, Palisade Plaza, you can walk around and take a look at it. So that's going to do it for us with our postcards that we have in our collection. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. I had a blast coming through and talking to this with you guys. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Okay, so it says, do I have side-by-side? No, unfortunately, I don't right now. On our Facebook page, on our social media page, the North Bergen North Bergen Historical Society, we do that kind of on a bi-weekly basis. We will show older images of North Bergen in comparison with the current location today. So if you follow us, we got tons of great stuff that go up there. And if you have any questions, guys, you can type them into the chat box on the side. And like I said, I'll gladly answer any questions. Doesn't have to be about the postcards. If you have any questions about North Bergen at all, or the history of North Bergen, I'll gladly try to answer them. All right, well, I guess if there's there we go. Can I link? Yes, I will actually post a article that has all these postcards and the explanations onto Facebook as well. That is not a problem at all. All right, so listen, if you guys don't have any questions, right, I would just like to point out today for anybody who is, obviously you're all here because you're interested in North Bergen, but today, it's June 13th today, right? And this is a big day for one of North Bergen's greatest residents, Jimmy Braddock, right? Everybody knows Braddock Park, North Hudson Heights Park, James Braddock, the boxer. Today is the day in 1935 that he will actually fight Max Baer. On our Facebook page, we actually just put up a link to the original footage of the fight. So if you do want to watch the footage, you could go back and watch it. If you want to watch the movie Cinderella Man, you can watch that and compare the two. But again, that happened today in 35. That's a big deal. I know coming down the road here, we have another couple of virtual presentations coming up. In July, we'll be doing a presentation on the Battle of Bull's Ferry and Blockhouse Point, which we kind of looked at a couple in the postcards. And then in August, we have an unsolved murder mystery dating back to 1905 in Little Coney Island. So it'll be very interesting. I hope you guys could come in and check those out. Yeah, I look forward to talking to you guys again, and thank you for coming, and hope you guys have a great day, all right? Have a good afternoon, guys.
Michael, thank you very much for coming, and thank you everyone who came to the presentation for coming as well. I hope everyone has a very good day.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just saw Jim, if you're still here, which you are, good, I'm glad you're still here, Jim. Sorry, I just saw your question come in as I was wrapping up. So am I interested in Hudson County, the history of Hudson County from the 1800s? Yeah, we're interested in all aspects of the county's history. We've tried to do as much research as possible prior in the 19th century. We do know that the area, North Bergen itself, that's really where I kind of focus on. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Which book do you have? Do you know the name of it by any chance?
Oh, Amanda, thanks for coming by. Thank you. Yeah, I believe that the history of Hudson County, I believe we have that on a digital copy. The Library of Congress has that online, so we do have access to it. That is a very in-depth, detailed book. But yeah, there's that. If you are interested too, through the Library of Congress, I could actually try to put up some of the links on our website. They have a ton of other books related to the history of Hudson County, especially the Charles Winfield books. He was kind of the go-to guy about the history of the area. So I could put those up on our Facebook page if you like. Oh, okay, great. Yeah. Well, listen, I would love to pick your brain on some of the history of the fire department in North Bergen. So if you ever get a chance, please reach out to us. Oh yeah, like I said, just reach out to us when you can. We can see if we can get something going. I would love to look at the fire department in North Bergen. I mean, I remember as a kid that they would do Santa Claus on the fire trucks every holiday. So I remember the fire department well before they changed over. All right, guys. But on that note, it looks like it's a great day outside, and stay safe out there, social distance, and all that stuff. But enjoy your day, guys. Thanks for coming. Bye.